Chemical hygiene. This is basically how you store and label your chemicals. That's what this all focuses on. So you need to take some time to look in your handout in your workbook, and you need to look at the chemical labeling instructions. I'm going to run through it here in a moment, and then the lab safety audit. And I'm going to go through both of those fairly quickly here in a moment, but they are something you need to be aware of and you need to be ready to look at and respond to. All right, so, and then once again, pay attention to how your chemicals are being disposed. Quantity matters. Try to limit your quantity. And even if something's technically safe to go down the drain, you want to dilute it. So just keep that sink running while you're slowly pouring it down the drain. Even if it's safe to go down the drain, you want to dilute it. I had a guy tell me that dilution is the solution to pollution. And so that kind of works. So let's take a moment, look at that lab safety information here with labeling and the audit, and we'll look at those right now. All right, so this is straight from your workbook. So it starts on page 131. So labeling chemicals. So the way things are labeled in the lab and the way things are labeled in your storeroom are going to vary. Okay, so a proper label is just helpful for making sure that everything's safe. So long-term storage, it should have the following information. If it doesn't have this information on it and it's not in a store-bought, or online bought original container, you need to have this information on it. Your long-term storage bottle should have it. If it doesn't have it, then you need to look at either relabeling it or buying new chemicals. So it needs to have the name and concentration, no abbreviations or formulas. It can have the formula after it, but it's got to have the full name. Any hazards, a little chemical safety guide, what needs to happen if those hazards happen. Warning and first aid, that kind of all goes together. What family it goes to, where should it be stored in your storeroom? That comes from the Flynn catalog, and there are other resources out there on how to store things in your storeroom. There are certain groups and families, things that go together. Shelf life, solubility, date purchase, and then this is a number that goes with it in terms of a catalog number. All right, so here's an example of a long-term one. So hazard for hydrochloric acid, 6 molar, severely corrosive to skin. You need to wear goggles, apron, and using the hood. First aid, get medical attention immediately. Do not induce vomiting or rub eyes. And then I say see the MSDS sheet for more details. Store in an acid cabinet. It has a good shelf life. It moves on into the next page. If stored correctly, dispose using Flynn's Guide 24B, soluble in water. There's the number. This one we purchased it. Then I have another one over here for the copper 2 chloride. It's powder. It's also known as cupric chloride. There's the formula. Toxic, wear goggles. Prepare solutions in the hood. Here's your first aid. Store with the inorganic halides. And so it has poor shelf life. It tends to absorb water out of the air badly and gets wet. And so it's important that you keep it well sealed. All right, and so that's one of the things that happens there. All right, so that's long term. Temporary storage, these are things like if you're making a solution that you're going to use for a lab. You're just going to use it for the lab and then you're going to dispose of it. That's a temporary storage. And so those are shorter, they have less information. It's just simply the name of the chemical, the concentration, the formula, what are its hazards, who prepared it, that would be me, Jeffrey Todd Anderson, when it was prepared, and so on. That is just useful information. Okay? And so you just do that for temporary storage. Once again, you're labeling everything so that if someone else comes into your lab, they know what it is and they know when it was there. If you're the chemistry teacher this year and 2 years from now it's somebody else, they can walk into the storeroom or in the lab and know what is what and have a good idea of what they need to do with it. So that's labeling chemical compounds. Okay, next here is your lab safety audit. This is in your resources, it's in your notebook. So what this is, this takes more time to do. This will take you probably most of a day. And so it's something you can do over the summer or during a break day. But it's just going through and making sure that you have an understanding of what's in your lab, what's in your storeroom, what are your safety protocols as a school, that kind of thing. And so hazard information signs and labels. This is a key one to get done before school starts. Do you have a hygiene plan? You can find those online. I can provide you with one as well. So MSDS sheets. Do you have an inventory? What's in your storeroom? Do you have operating procedures if something bad happens? That kind of thing. Do teachers have access to these MSDS sheets? Are all your things labeled? Do you have all your waste containers labeled when you use them? Biohazard labels if you need them. Okay. And then personal safety. Do you have all your safety things? People have their hair back. Now, these are the safety rules you need to cover. All right. Then housekeeping. Do you have exits that are free? Aisles are, no book bags around the aisles when you're doing a lab. You don't want people tripping. There should be nothing else on the lab bench other than their books. Other than what's being used for the lab. You have a separate container for doing broken glassware. You have the ability for them to wash their hands. Okay, and so it just goes through the chemical hood, the chemical storage, biological things, work practices, no food or drink in the fridge in the lab, hot plates, that kind of stuff, electrical hazards, emergency equipment. Do you have a fire extinguisher? Do you have something for eye wash? If you don't have an eye wash station, you need to look at getting eye wash bottles. They don't work as well, but they work. Do you know where a first aid kit is? Is everybody familiar with where these things are, and so on? So this audit serves as just a checklist to make sure you've thought of everything that you need to process through in order to make sure you have a safe lab space for yourself and for your students. And so that's why I included it in your workbook so that you can go through it and check it. And it's one of those things, like if you're in charge of, or you work with multiple people who are using the lab, every person who uses that lab space, every person who walks into that storeroom needs to do this audit, in my opinion. Because they need to know where everything is. They need to know how does your school do this? How does your department do these things? How do they respond? How do they store things? That kind of thing. This has to be taken seriously. When you have that one teacher who's just going to randomly put chemicals back on the cabinets, it causes safety hazards for everybody. If someone's not labeling things correctly, it causes safety hazards for everybody who uses that space. And so I would say everyone who uses the lab needs to go through this audit. And if you have deficiencies, depending upon how severe the deficiencies are, you can choose to deal with them immediately, or you can say, well, that's something we'll have to worry about next summer, or over Christmas, winter break, or over the Labor Day weekend, whatever. You need to then take time to fix these problems. Now, like I said, with like the MSDS sheets, if you don't have all of them, start getting them as you use those chemicals. And then later, when you have more time, you can work on getting the rest of them. Or if you have student helpers at your school, that's something that they can do, that you can give them a list of chemicals. They can look them up, they can print them out, and then you can put them in a notebook. That's something they can do. It's pretty mindless. It just involves looking it up and printing it out. And so those things are all there. So use this audit, use the labeling instructions, just to be aware of what the risks are and how to minimize them and how to deal with them when they happen. Because labs are important. They're great in chemistry. They're fun. I love doing labs most of the time. And so you want to make sure it just stays safe. Because a lab is just not much fun when somebody gets hurt. And you just don't want to have those stories. And so be aware of what your risks are. Be aware of how to minimize them. And then be aware of how to respond to them when they happen. Because they're going to happen. You're working with teenagers and chemicals and glassware. Things are going to get spilled. Things are going to get mixed with things they shouldn't be mixed with. Things are going to get broken. You need to know how you're going to respond before the accident happens. And so with that, just like I said, if you have any questions on keeping your kids safe, keeping yourself safe, email me, message me, office hours. I'm available to help you as much as possible.